Listen, please go ahead. Hi.
All right. Hello. Hello. I'm just making sure that my Ustream is working, and you can see me there.
We see you perfectly.
Beautiful. Well, hello. I'm Helga Jacobson. I'm an artist from Winnipeg, Canada, and so I'm here in the master's program, and I'm so happy to take part. Our Ustream does keep dropping out, so it may take a few little moments for us.
It's a lab about low tech, so
yes.
failure.
Perfect. Okay, so if you read right now, let's go to the slide.
Hi.
Hi.
Okay, let's go.
We're ready to go. Okay. So I'm going to start by just talking about a little bit to do with my practice. And so the topic of my talk today is about demystifying technology. So my personal experience with technology has been within the realm of biotechnology. So I started doing work I've always done work that incorporates biological material or organic material. And so when I really started working in biotech, in the biotech realm, was when I started a mentorship program through MAWA, which is the Mentoring Artists for Women in Arts, which is an organization in Winnipeg. And I was working with a woman named Eleanor Bond, who's this incredible artist and a great mentor for me. And she introduced me to a friend of hers named Betsy Thorstensen, who works as the archivist at the Manitoba History Museum. And she taught me her practice, which is related to dioramas. And she has found a way of plasticizing biological material. So she gave me her recipe for plasticizing organic material. So I've been pickling leaves and turning them into these kind of scaffolds that then I hand manipulate. So the leaves themselves are scaffolds which used to be organic, but I've turned inorganic by replacing all of the organic material with plastic. So then what I do is I hand sew all of the leaves together. So this piece is a piece that I've been working on for a number of years. It's called The Relics of Frankenstein's Monster. And it's kind of this exercise in trying to understand that space between organic and inorganic, and also between life and death, which has been a prevalent theme in my practice for a very long time. And so at the same time, while I was starting this, there was also this incredible workshop which took place also in Winnipeg through Video Pool, which is a new media organization that I've been involved in for a very long time. And so they put on a workshop called Toxicity, which was related to a show that they were doing on bioart. So I was able to work with this incredible artist named Nikki Sparrow, who's from Australia, and she was teaching us how to do different, very simple, kind of low-tech biological experiments. So you'll see the slide on the left, or my left. I think it'll be your left, and it's a little that has the eating of a banana on it. So this is it's a very easy. Take the banana and then mash it up into the bag with some alcohol and some other material, and then extract the DNA from it. And this method was really seminal for me in learning how easy it was to utilize biotechnology at home. And it was kind of this great moment where I was able to understand what biological material looked like and what it felt like and how it could be used as a medium or what it was like as a substrate. So the other image that you're seeing is these different bacterial cultures. So all of the people in the workshop were making very simple agar plates, which you can do at home. And we were just trying out to see what would make really interesting visuals. So bacteria as a drawing method. So I'll move on to the next slide, which shows at the top the same bacteria, but a little bit closer. So these bacterial cultures were, well, mine specifically were a lot of bodily parts. So it's like little bits of armpit sweat, or looking at earwax and things like this on a plate, and just to kind of understand what's happening that's unseen. So this idea of where the inorganic and the inorganic kind of interface and intersect. At the bottom, you'll also see we were doing exercises in learning how to put P-glow or GFP into different bacteria. So we were working with E. coli specifically, and then creating zones of inhibition around it. This can also be a really beautiful drawing mechanism, and it was a really interesting exercise, I suppose. So the next slide here that I'm showing is an image of a few of the laboratories that I've worked with, as some home laboratories and some more scientific laboratories. So up at the top, we have Nikki Spuru, who, in a saintly figure, as she was in the workshop, she really was just this kind of presiding over our workshop as if she was a saint. She was wonderful. And then the laboratory that we worked out of, which was in Video Pool itself, not a laboratory, but there was some laboratory equipment that we brought in, and then also the E. coli, which you can order a lot of biological material and resources from online sources such as like Carolina Biological. But then down at the bottom, on the left, you'll see there's an image of the Acadia University Laboratories. Oh, and I'm seeing that the stream was lost, so I'm just turning it back on here. Okay, so just to make sure. Okay. So then down at the bottom left, there's an image of a laboratory that I was working out of at the Acadia University. And then on the right, there's one from the herbarium at the University of Manitoba, which is a dry media laboratory that collects plant samples and then has a lot of microscopes that I've worked out of. So going back to this idea of accessibility and understanding high-tech versus low-tech laboratories. I don't think it's working. Oh, there we go. This Ustream is being very stubborn with us, so I'm just going to, I'll stall a couple times. Work very hard to get it working. So I was really interested upon taking this workshop. I was very interested in understanding how you can create laboratories at home, and it's very simple. So I've done work with ghost fungus, so looking at bioluminescence and inoculating grain culture with bioluminescence, and so what I've done in my practice is try to implement a lot of the exercises that I've done through different residencies or different workshops and implement them into my practice. So with the ghost fungus that I was working with, we were working in a kitchen and inoculating the grain culture. And this to me was a really seminal moment in understanding that you don't need to be in a laboratory to try to start to understand how life works or how bacteria functions, etc. You can just self-authorize and take on the initiative to be able to do this for yourself, and not necessarily for scientific means, but for understanding existence, so more in a philosophic realm. So I'm very interested in So I started at the
Sorry, excuse me. We
Hi.
now we lose the sound
for a moment, but you're on again. Please go ahead.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Thank you so much for telling me. I'm glad I'm not talking but not being heard. So if you can see the slides that I'm showing right now, I was really interested in microscopy, and so the first point where I was able to access microscopes was when I was at the Ayatana residency in Halifax in Canada. And so we were learning how to use microscopes and attaching the appropriate equipment to be able to take microscopic photos. So in the middle slide is an example of a crystal that it's the same crystal in all three images. One image is in the middle is the one from the microscope itself, but then the one on the far left was just a photo that I took with my iPhone through the microscope's lens. And this for me was a very big moment where I realized that you really only needed to be able to make friends with people in laboratories, and that you didn't necessarily need to have the equipment yourself to be able to start to understand the immensity of biology and what the procedures and the technology in laboratories can afford you the opportunity to discover. So I also started looking through. I have a little microscope that I carry around in my pocket, and I look at things through it, and I take photos. So the photo on the right is a photo that I took while foraging for mushrooms in the forest, and just again through my iPhone. This is maybe not the best example of photography you can take, but it shows you the scale that you're working with. So this again is a means for creating visuals from what you wouldn't normally have access to, but it's very accessible. So you even have a microphone at hand, but you.
Sorry, again, the song.
Okay.
Okay, now. Let's go again. Thanks. Sorry.
This is great. It's very low tech.
Yeah, very low tech.
So on the left hand of the slides, there's a photograph that I've taken again through my microscope, or through a microscope, but with my iPhone. This is just a very quick photo that you can take, and it's very deep. So you can see quite a lot of detail. It's a photo which is just a little. You find them when you're walking in the hills all of the time. They cling onto your clothing, and I was quite interested in how you could capture these images and just take them home with you to be able to work with, as opposed to needing to have access to or being able to afford the equipment that you would need in a laboratory. I'm just going to move on to the next slide here. Is that okay? I have a lovely friend who's you'll hear later on talking, who's figuring out the tech behind our Ustream. So I'm sorry if it's a little bit disrupted. But the photo that you're looking at right now is a picture of an artist named Bev Pike, who is also from Winnipeg. So after taking part in the toxicity workshop and having worked through Video Pool for a very long time, this new media organization, which is just incredible, they're very open to ideas and constantly developing new programming. They allowed me the opportunity to develop and run a bio art chapter through Winnipeg. I've included little links along the way, so hopefully you'll have seen those. But so we ran a workshop through the herbarium at the University of Manitoba, and And we also, at the same time as doing microscopic photos and teaching artists how to take photos of through a microscope with their iPhone, we were also using a camera lucida lens. So this camera lucida onto the microscope and allows what your right hand is doing with what is under the microscope itself. So you can live trace different plants. So the plant that Bev is tracing is a Drosera, which is this carnivorous plant. So she was interested in doing a body of work related to revenge and feminism and looking at how soft plant material is, but how it can also be very angry and can maybe exact revenge and have this emotional relationship that we don't always associate with plants. So she used it as a poetic means for interpreting this idea of revenge, which turned out quite beautifully. So she's in the process of making a book. So again, the process is that your left eye is looking down at the specimen through the microscope, and then the camera lucida makes a visual just over top of your right hand, and the two simply superimpose over one another, and you can trade. So very good technology that is used in laboratory, but still exists as a technology. So it's a low-tech tool for doing botanical drawings. So other examples from this workshop, the dry media workshop that I ran through Video Pool at the Winnipeg, or the Wynn Herbarium in Winnipeg, are from the top left, and the one just below it are Seth Woodyard, who did a number of drawings that were circular, that were these imaginary plants. So these ones were specifically around the idea of masculinity and the softness of plants, or kind of the romanticism behind plants and organic material. So he did these kind of palaces and very like in the very dark image on the right. So the second, like not the top, but just to the right, is like a series of hairy buttocks, male butts, which was they were quite beautifully drawn and also a little bit humorous and also very poignant. Then just to the right is an artist named Toby Gillies, who came into the herbarium and was really interested in the idea of cataloging. And so he worked with plants that would find in malls. So in great big shopping centers, cutting the plants and then making them as if they were part of a herbarium. So this is the catalog of what you find in more urban places, like in malls. Then the image on the very bottom is by Ken Gregory. He did an Arduino piece, which was bioresponsive, so it kind of chirped back at you as you interacted with it. And then we ran the herbarium workshop a second time, and we worked with a number of artists. The top left was Heather Comus, who works with pig intestines and different material like human hair or bugs, or she does work with like octopus eggs and things like this, and sews them all together and creates this beautiful floating kind of universe. And then just on the right, there's a drawing which is an imagined plant specimen that was a combination of a number of different specimens that were looked at in the lab at the herbarium. And so there, it's kind of, yeah, this dream realism. And then down at the bottom left, we had a woman who was looking at plant specimens and then combining them with drawings of teeth, because she was very interested in dentistry and the medicinal property of plants that could potentially help with dentistry without having to do operations and things like this. And then on the right there, we had an artist named Carly Friesen, who compiled photographs of all of the different plants in the herbarium and then photoshopped them together to this imagined reality So where this has taken my practice, all of my research into biotech has been that I've become very interested in producing my own form of technology. So technology in the sense of it being a branch of knowledge that deals with the interrelation with life, society, and the environment, drawing upon subjects as industrial arts, engineering, applied science, and pure science. So more simply, the application of this sort of knowledge, for practical ends. So I created a body of work, and I'm still creating a body of work called iatroregenerism. So that's not my slide at all, but here we go. So the idea of cultural iatrogenesis, which has been written into the medical model as referring to the ways of dealing with the loss and destruction of traditional ways of dealing with and making sense of death, suffering, and sickness. In this way, the medicalization of life leads to cultural harm as society members lose their autonomous coping skills. So I've decided to imagine a world where we can regenerate some autonomous capabilities. So I've created iatroregenerism as a technology which functions as technologists work to reintroduce practices through experimentation in a means to create more autonomous healing practices based in traditional methodologies. So what that actually looks like is that I do scientific analysis on things like spells. So this slide that you're seeing now is a zine that I made where
Sorry. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
We can hear you. It's only that I say you, sorry, stop, and the sound is come back now.
Hello.
That's good.
Sorry.
Stop, but I can hear you.
Okay, thanks. Let's go.
Okay, so I'm showing a slide of I was very heartbroken when I was doing a residency, the same residency through biophilia where I was in Halifax, looking at crystals through microscopes and so on. So I was very interested in the scientific methodologies. So I was looking at the pragmatic method, wherein you can analyze something and make it quantifiable. So really, I'm looking at the things that are not quantifiable, like heartbreak. So I couldn't really understand it, so I thought I'd put it through a method that I did understand. So I put it through the pragmatic method. So I put a hypothesis, and I did data analysis and collection, and then I had a formal conclusion based upon rigorous research. So I found out that I was heartbroken and that I was the recipient of unrequited love, which is helpful for me, but also an interesting exercise in creating a new technology. So a new means for which there could be a practical outcome through experimentation. So other work that I've done where I've created my own laboratory and have practiced, I'm just getting my use going right now. So other examples of how I've created my own laboratory and my own, or practiced my own technology is through this work where I did what was Fortuna's Bar 9, where I do proper data collection through SBAR technology, or research. So I do proper forms where I then, I'm so sorry, my connection's so bad here. And there we go. So I do data collection with another iatroregenerist technologist who I train, who then becomes my triage nurse. So they collect data from people about what they're seeking, and then I create work like medicine for them through medicinal herbology, but also through like potions. So in a traditional sense, as in is in love potion number 9, which is a traditional Roma potion that's brewed on the 9th month on the 9th day at 9th hour. And so I brewed these specific potions for people based upon how their heart is feeling. So another laboratory created was C-Space in Winnipeg, where I did what I call graphological tasseomancy, where I predicted the future for people through a statistical means, where I got them to drink some very, very strong coffee. And then once they were finished, they handed the cup to me, and I flipped them over onto a projector screen, let them dry for a while, and then I analyzed what was symbolically seen. So this was a tie-in with dream psychology, with also looking at handwriting analysis and synthesizing them into part of my actual regenerative practice. So this slide that you're seeing right now is a visual of what was printed, coffee prints that were then hung onto light boxes that I created. So in my practice, I've created a whole system and through research into existing systems of scientific research, but then also medicinal practices. But then I also like to hand build all of my equipment as a means for low technology. So I don't allow myself to become hindered by the fact that I do not have access to laboratories on a daily basis or laboratory equipment. I just make my own. So quickly, I'll just give you 2 other examples. I did another performance kind of piece where I again did kind of a statistical analysis and data collection of people who were just not feeling well in a general sense. And then I created a potion for them. So on the bottom left, you'll see a potion that the photo itself is taken by sorry, just one moment here. That was taken by one of my participants who I then gave them a visual. So a bottle that they take home and take, but then I also give them a prescription. So these are all medicinal herbs that I forage within a specific area. So this was specific to Winnipeg, where the show was, but it can be extrapolated to other areas where I research the medicinal properties of herbs, and then I make a map of their physical location. Pardon me. And there we are. So I make a visual map of where the herbs could be foraged, so that way you can then be a self-authority and forage for yourself and find your own medicinal herbs. So a lot of these practices go in hand with ideas based around the culture of medicine. So I also try to create spaces where there's music and community happening, and creating opportunities for people to do things that are very healthy for them, like going for walks or drinking tea and being more meditative in their daily existence. So this next documentation is from a show that I did called Epidemiological Line, where I collected objects from people that had negative associations. Again, I'm so sorry, this Ustream is difficult for me. I'm a low technologist after all. So this next show that I did was called Epidemiological Binding, where I collected artifacts from people that held negative associations. So they were objects such as wedding rings from failed marriages. They were love letters. I had people give me ticket stubs, pieces of meteors, like all kinds of things. And so I collected them and I took the story from the object. And then I wrap them in a cloth along with organic materials such as cherries or petals from flowers and things like this. And then I buried them in a chamber. So I'm going to jump back to the last slide. You can see the chamber just in the background. So I added in the objects that people had given me, and then I buried them in this chamber for a month, and allowed them to soak in the juices from the earth and to release whatever negative energy was in it. And then I boiled all of these in a pot with mordant, and then I was able to give the objects back to the owners without negative association. So it could create health in the sense of being able to release negative energy and still hold on to the things that you are sentimental for, potentially. So with all of these jokes and with the knowledge that this is the wrong slide. I don't know how to go back to myself here. Here we are. Okay, so with all of these different practices that I've done, I've really been interested in how society can create space for intuitive healing, responsive engagement within the power dynamics of healer and person seeking wellness. I'm interested in the use of aesthetics within medical and healing cultural to regenerate the ability to autonomously cope with whether it's possible, and questioning whether it's possible to apply rational science to irrational realms of non-medical mental healing. I think that's and I'll just say that I've really found a lot of strength and power in the ability to reclaim self-authority with regards to technology. So I'm very interested in being part of the master's program through which we've been invited to do this talk, because it affords me the opportunity to gain access to technology, but not necessarily to use it. So I'm going to leave you there, and I'm going to pass over the Skype and this very glitchy Ustream to the next presenter.
Okay, thank you very much. It was great.
Thank you so much.
It was very good. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Olga.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Take care. Bye-bye.
See you.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Good morning.
Hello.
Hello. I'm also not Taylor, but my name is Max, and I'm another of the master's students at PCA. And my subject that I am going to talk about is about improvisation. My background is that I'm a musician, and I've recently entered into the new world of fine arts. And I have a bachelor in jazz performance, which, as I'm sure you well know, is heavily tied in with improvisation. And I'm interested in exploring improvisation in visual arts, as well as technological interactive arts as well. So this is why I've undertaken the massive task of changing my entire practice around. Today I want to talk about sort of the things that I'm interested in pursuing as a newcomer to the fine arts, visual art scene, from my experience as a musician. So let me just get the things I need to show you what I would like to talk about.
Okay.
So when I was thinking about doing a jazz performance degree, and during that time in my jazz performance degree, I was always very interested in improvised music, especially the improvised jazz music. from the city, musicians like Eric Dolphy and the Art Ensemble of Chicago, musicians and groups that I find very important to me because of their spontaneous and improvised nature in the way that they work. And I've always wanted to be able to get that and bring it into a technological realm and an interactive realm if possible. During my time at university, I did a little bit of electronic music as just as an extra class that I could do. And I was introduced to the music and the installation works of an artist called Alvin Lucia. He is most well known for a piece of music called I'm Sitting in a Room, where he sits in a room and records himself speaking the phrase, I'm sitting in a room different to the one that you are in now. I am recording the sound of my speaking voice and I'm going to play it back into the room again and again until the resonant frequencies of the room reinforce themselves so that any semblance of my speech, with perhaps the exception of rhythm, is destroyed. What you will hear then are the natural resonant frequencies of the room articulated by speech. I regard this activity not so much as a demonstration of a physical fact, but more a way to smooth out any irregularities of speech it may have. So he was recording his voice on a very old tape machine, and this is, and then he would play that back into the room and re-record the sound again. So in doing so, his voice became only the noise of the room itself, effectively. And he did this more as an experiment of sound than a piece of art, but from his work, many other electronic musicians were encouraged to do other arts that were of a similar nature. He also did another piece called Music on a Long Thin Wire, where he connected two bits of a very long, thin wire in a room, and it also recorded the resonant frequencies of the room as people moved around, as humidity levels changed. And I think at this point, when I heard of this, I felt that it was getting closer and closer to my practice and closer and closer to something that I wish to practice as a visual artist. It was the interest of people affecting sound without them necessarily knowing that they're affecting sound, and interacting with the space and interacting with the art piece in itself to create the form of art. Another piece that I have found, which was done in 2011, I believe, by a German artist, is a piece called Years, where it's an illustration piece, a technological piece, where I cut the trunk of a tree and had record discs that they played on a modified record player. And what was interesting for me in this situation is that it was getting a technological art form of generative art, effectively, but using the natural generations of the environment to create a piece. And further than that, it wasn't just using a visual generation to create a piece, but it was creating something that was a very visual generative aspect into something that was a sonic aspect. So for me as a musician, I found that particularly intriguing. And the object itself, if you go online and look for it, because I unfortunately haven't got a picture to show you, is it's also visually quite an attractive piece, because each piece of wood, every tree, obviously, has its own fingerprint and has its own characteristics and beauty. And from another side of that, recently I discovered two Canadian electronic artists, I will call them, called Nicolas Bernier and Martin Messier, and they did an art piece that particularly resonates well with me, called La Chambre de Machine, which is the room of machines. And they created musical instruments that fused both digital technology and mechanical technology, and performed them live. And again, like the Years piece, they have a very aesthetic quality to them visually, as well as an audio sonic quality, which I appreciate. The other thing that I think is important for me in this particular piece is that its performative aspect meant that every time it was in a space, it was different. And I find that is something that I feel that we can explore more with technology, which I will try and go into a little bit more. So improvisation has existed for a long time, not only in music and not only in art. I recently watched a very interesting TED talk by a man called Sinek, and he was talking, his TED is called "How Do You Get Your Colleagues to Trust You?" And he was taking this TED talk, it's very much from the point of view of an entrepreneur and as a business person or a professional space. But a lot of the things that you said, I felt resonated with the subject matter of my interests. And he made a case where through community and safety, we were able to evolve and we were able to innovate our ideas and become the human race that we are. And I believe that artists as well have this same situation internally, where they need to be able to trust themselves and they need to have a community that's trusting so that they can go out and create anything they like, which I'm sure we can all understand that. The thing I think that where this extends further is that with interactive art, we also have to trust directly involved audience members who can affect the final product of our art pieces and art.
Sorry, Max.
Yeah.
The sound is okay. No, the sound is out, but now it's coming out. Okay, sorry.
All right. So through this model where we have our audience being able to affect our art pieces, and his talk about community and collaboration. Obviously, in our master's program, we are in a collaborative master's program, so that is something that we are all interested in, working as a team. For me as a musician, playing in bands is a common thing that we do. We have to trust each other to make a final product. And as an improvising musician, we've always had to trust our audience to understand, which as any artist can know, and all of you know, that you have to hope that your message or your theme or whatever you are trying to portray is portrayed by your audience. So in a modern technological sense, I think that because we are opening a direct dialogue, it is very interesting to me that this improvisation is happening not between just the artists, but also from the users as well. For improvisation to exist, I believe that there are three particular features that change it from just and chart to be improvisation. As that method create improvisation requires that you have training and practice what you know and what you're trained, and that you are open and free and happy to play. And then when it becomes its performative form, which is what I'm most interested in, for me in improvisation is that you are, rather than you are sculpting set time and space. So with installation pieces that have been done in the past, you are obviously sculpting the space and the time that people are walking around in. But with improvisation, is that you are also improvising it as it goes. So it's changing constantly, the final form, depending on who's in the space and working with the artist and that kind of thing. So it's a very visceral, raw way that the artist and the art form can become one in the same. And the other thing that remains for improvisation to exist is restriction. So, and I think restriction for an improviser allows you to be free-flowing and be able to be truly openly creative at will and spontaneously, because we all have the infinite potential to create amazing work, and sometimes that potential can really bring us down, which I'm sure many of you can do. With having inhibiting restrictions and rules to create focus really can create inspiration. And I think that the nice thing about interactive arts, especially new technology, is that your audience will be able to then change those restrictions on you, and then you can change what you're giving back to them, and they can change it again, and it's open for direct dialogue with the audience. In the past, much improvisation has been used to create artworks, there's obviously most famously Kandinsky created works called improvisations. And you know, he worked in a way because of his synesthesia, which is a you don't know, which I'm sure you do, a condition where you perceive forms and shapes in sounds and in time and rhythm. And so he would improvise his artworks onto his canvas, just in the same way that I would improvise a piece of music to an audience. Then outside of that improvisation, there is obviously through, we all know in technology, we make generative art. Before, I mean, early on in modern art, Vera Molnar, who's a French artist, she was interested in the restriction of programmatic restriction. So she would give herself a set of rules that she would have to abide by, and then she would act out those rules regardless of the aesthetic that she saw on a page. So she was working a lot like a computer would when we program a generative art piece, but in her physical being. And later on, then she went on to learn how to program computers and created computer art, did all of her generative. An interesting example of modern non-technological art that is really interactive and was changed by the audience, the artist herself, is an artist called Rebecca Belmore. She's a Canadian artist. She created an art installation for the Museum of Human Rights called Trace in 2014. And it was a large installation piece that hangs from a wall in the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. And each part of the installation was created by the public. And they are small, they are parts of the earth of the area that have been squeezed and set by people of the public. And her piece was to reflect the hands of generations of those who have come before and those who will come in the future. And it was to respect the people of the land where the museum is located. So in that sense, the form of the piece was informed by the wider public, the wider audience that will then later on see it. And for generations to come, it will be those people who lived at that time who you'll be seeing through the artwork that was curated by the artist. There's another artwork that I also was very interested to see firsthand, which was by Tino Segal, who is a British artist living in Berlin, I believe. He made an art piece called These Associations, where in the Tate in London, the gallery in London, in the large hall called the Turbine Hall, he had, I think it was about 150 performers walking up and down this enormous hall. And if you were to go down into the hall, by random, someone would come over to you and start talking to you. And they would tell you a story of their past, but they would leave out certain specifics about it. So for example, someone came over to me and talked to me about how he escaped his country and started a whole new life in England, but you never find out what his background is, and you never find out what his country was. And if you ask them, because you are open to converse, they will never divulge these small information, so you can then extrapolate that onto any sorts of other situations that you may have, or other people may have. So in this way, you are immersed in someone's experience, and it was both then interactive and, in my mind, it was improvisational, because the artists were given strict parameters. They were given a story that they had to tell initially, but then the story could then evolve for further information. And just like they're walking up and down, it was also constructed, it was choreographed. They would go through certain patterns, so visually it was quite interesting, as well as the content was interesting. And that sense of immersion, which I think one gets from improvised work and installation work, and the two combined, can be very raw and uncompromised. You can really say that its whole essence of when you get most affected by the work is because it is completely immersive, and you have an open dialogue with the art piece as well as the artist himself. and you also are taking part in it and learning something that you may not have learned, and directing it as well in your own right as a user or an audience member. So I think then technology really can open up a step or a barrier between us and our audience. There is a great work which I've recently learned about during my learnings of generative art and technological interactive art. It's an artwork by Ken Goldberg. It's called Telegarden, and it's an online art piece where he had a robot arm, and underneath of which was a garden. And anyone could log in from anywhere around the world and tend to this garden. And so in that way, it was interactive with the piece, and the rules were defined by the natural rules of the garden. You had to try and keep the garden alive. But then again, you didn't have to keep the garden alive. So you would then be breaking the rules, then be interacting in a way with your other members. But it was never a direct interaction. So I think that opens up, technology can really open up interesting interactions and interesting reflections on space and place. And can really break down kind of geographical boundaries as well as communication boundaries as well, if not between language or culture and that kind of thing. And furthermore from that, I think that for me as a performative artist, I think that it can really break down a sort of a dictatorial quality of maybe from what I've experienced as an artist, as a jazz musician, feeling like I would really like to engage more directly with my audience, or have them be able to inform my practice in the moment of producing my work. And I think that technology really opens up the possibility of that, like it hasn't been able to before. And from generative art through technology, being able to then tap into generative art through nature, which I think improvisation is, because we are just naturally working off of our judgment and our space and time. I think it creates quite an interesting experience and will reward us with all sorts of exciting new works and experiences for our audience and us as artists. So that is what I am going to try and research over my course of this master's program and throughout my life. And yeah, I think it's an interesting dialogue for all of us to look into. Improvisation and the spontaneity of our work as new media artists. I believe we have one last talker, so I will find Taylor, and Taylor will take over.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Sorry?
It was my pleasure.
Thanks a lot. It was great.
Thank you.
Take care. It's Taylor coming back?
Do you know?
We will see, yes. I hope so.
Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Hola. Bien.
Sorry, I don't listen to you.
Hi, tell me.
So I am the last one today.
Okay.
Unfortunately.
But
Yeah.
listen.
So then tomorrow, I believe you have 3 more speakers.
Right.
And I hope.
Yeah.
But you know what? We can have 4. If Taylor wants to come back tomorrow, there's no problem at all.
Okay, I will pass that along, and hopefully Taylor will be able to speak tomorrow.
Okay, a million thanks.
No worries. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a nice rest of the festival.
Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Es que hay que quitarle lo primero. Bueno, yes.
Perfecto.